Welcome to Money, Manifestation, and Business, the podcast that shows you how to use your energy, intention, and consciousness to reprogram your money mindset, unleash a new level of possibility, and create a life and business that lights you up. I'm your host, Jamie Berman, and I invite you to join me each week for a dose of inspiration, coaching, and teachings to help you rewrite your money story, create abundance on your terms, and grow your business in a way that's fully aligned for you. This is going to be so much fun. Let's dive in. Welcome, everyone. I am bringing a special guest on. I'm bringing the amazing Karla Fitz, who is someone who's been in my world for maybe about, I think, a year and a half is when you came into the movement and then came into the mastermind. And it's been such an honor and privilege to be your coach and to witness your entire journey of really starting your coaching business, growing your coaching business, evolving in how you manifest. And I'm so excited to have you on because Karla is the Catholic life coach. So she brings her love and devotion to Catholicism and her faith into the manifestation process. And Karla recently did a podcast episode on her podcast. Your podcast is called The Life Coach, or yes, the Catholic Life Coach, right?
Catholic Life Coach podcast.
The Catholic Life Coach podcast, where she talked about being Catholic and manifesting. And I thought it was so good. I was like, Karla, let's get on the podcast. I want to talk about, this is for anyone, whether you're Catholic or religious or not, but how can you bring your faith into your process? And I think you are such a beautiful example of how you do that. And I wanted to dive into that today and talk further about it. So welcome, Karla.
Thank you, Jamie, so much. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited for this podcast. My name is Karla Fitz. I'm the Catholic Life Coach. I'm the host of the Catholic Life Coach podcast. And I love all things manifestations because I think for me, I kind of had that same thought of like, oh, I don't know if this is for me at the beginning when I first heard about you. And I feel like the more we've worked together and the more I've learned about manifestation, I've learned to translate it into our faith. And it's been such a fun process to see my life evolve and transform. Yeah.
Well, and I want to talk about that evolution because when we met, you weren't niched in the Catholic life coach. I remember we actually coached through that and you got that clarity that is exactly what you wanted to do. So what were you doing before? And I'm curious, did you always bring your faith into what you were doing as a coach, or is it something that's evolved over time?
Yeah, it was something that it evolved over time because it was something that I was trying to maintain for myself, but I was not bringing into the business. So I was doing weight loss because the way I started in life coaching was weight loss. I came in, met my very first life coach. And after 6 months, I had lost 85 pounds. And it was just an insane transformation from the very beginning. So that was super powerful for me. And then I fell in love with life coaching. And so I thought I would just go in and do weight loss because it seemed to make sense. And I want to put it in quote because that's like our human brain trying to take control and say, no, this is what makes sense. I remember when we started working together, one of the first things we coached was actually starting the Catholic Life Coach podcast. And I remember just thinking like, oh, I don't know if this is the right niche for me. But it's what I have loved about it is that the more I have stepped into that calling and into that true part of me, things have just developed naturally. And then I have been able to show up in a much better way than if I was just denying that truth about myself.
Yes. So I went through something similar where I picked a niche out of what made sense. And I think that, I always say it is good to actually pick something rather than not pick something. Don't wait till you have the perfect niche or you find your calling, because it actually is a lot of times action that creates clarity. Like we always say, like, you can't steer a parked car. So it can be helpful to just pick something, even if it is from your head. But it's interesting, just like as you've pointed out the difference in how it feels when you pick something from your head and what feels like you should do or what feels like it makes sense versus what feels like a calling. And you mentioned that this just feels really natural. So I'm curious, what do you feel is the difference between the two? And how did you get to a place where you did discover what your calling is, what your purpose is?
Okay, so my journey was a little bit different. I feel like it's kind of funny because when I first certified from the life coach school,
Yep.
my very, very first goal was to create a business that was centered on my faith. It was to support Catholic women.
It's, oh my gosh, that
So
is so weird. I feel like that happens where we write something down or we say this is what we want to do. And then it comes full circle because we kind of like either totally forget we decided to do that or we just put it off. That's wild. Yeah.
Yes.
I love it.
And so that was a little bit different for me, but that's what I love is that you go in this journey and yes, you open up to trying new things, but God ultimately is like, I got you. You'll come right back. And that's exactly what happened to me. But I think what changed was that my coaching is completely different because I've been involved God into it. And then the way I think about coaching has always made so much more sense to me with him in the middle.
Yeah.
Whereas when I was trying to see it as the secular or not involving God, it just didn't make sense for me.
Yes.
And so I think that was the thing that changed everything because then I was able to coach naturally. I wasn't fighting oh, what am I saying? I don't want to mess something up. And even in the podcast, that's what I started noticing. The more I stepped into my faith and how I see things just come out the way I believe them instead of editing myself. Because I think that's what I was doing a lot of is editing myself.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I love this so much. How do you bring God in the middle?
Okay. So basically for me, anything that comes to you like a calling or a desire, I fully believe that is being placed there by him for a reason. And with life coaching, we have been given authority in our thoughts and our emotions in order to show up in a way that empowers us rather than makes us feel small and unkeepable or incapable. And with him in the middle, things just kind of make sense. Like to me, I always think of God doesn't want us to be in here suffering in our brain. And so when I bring him into the picture, it's so much to me, it's just easier to talk about life coaching from a perspective of the point of life coaching is to overcome the thoughts that are just causing an insane amount of pain that he ultimately does not want us to feel. And it doesn't help us to serve him because it's just, we waste so much time. I call it the whole I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I'm feeling. And I believe all the lies that are in my brain. Does that make sense?
100%. What does that look like when you say I bring God in the middle? Is it an intention? Do you open up? Is it a prayer? What does that look like for you?
So for me, I do prayer time right before where I just call the Holy Spirit so that I'm led by God to guide my clients. That's one thing. But personally, I think that's the biggest shift has been personally for me. How I manifest, how I meditate. For me, it's a lot of time in prayer with the Eucharist, and I just go into Mass and I celebrate with God. And then a lot of the meditation part of it is so much asking him and connecting with him, what it is that he wants for me and how does he want me to move next. And one of the traditions, what's it called? Practices that I love to is connecting with our future self. Because to me, that practice is stepping into, we've already reached that desire that he put in our hearts and how is he calling us to act? And then I love asking for confirmation. That's my thing too. It's okay, is this what you want from me? And not in a weird, oh, make the light blink twice. Not like that, but
give me a sign.
Yes, that's not what I mean. Yeah. But I mean, he's very persistent. And that's what I tell my clients too. When you have something in your heart, he will be persistent in that he wants you to pursue this thing.
Totally.
Yeah.
You can feel that with desires, right? Those things that you keep pushing away, but it doesn't go away. And I love that. It's that's because maybe God's knocking on your door hello.
Yes. Well, and that's the amazing thing. It's that's my thing with my goal. My original goal was to be the Catholic life coach. I just didn't know I was going to have that title. And God is okay, it's right here. But when our minds are so close to receiving that information, it doesn't come.
Yeah. How has that changed your coaching sessions? If you from maybe, I don't know, did you always pray before? Did you always bring God? Okay. So how have you noticed that shifting the way that you coach?
I just think prayer just helps me calm down into focusing on my client and focusing on what they're saying instead of focusing in what I'm thinking or feeling. It just helps me to recenter on like, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm supporting them.
Yeah.
And empowering them. It just helps me to just, come back into center.
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. I do a similar practice. It's like an opening up. It's an intention to open up to God and channel like what's meant to come through in sessions. And I can feel it. I can feel the difference too. Like I feel like some of the stuff I sometimes say, I'm like, wait, what? That's not even like what I would normally say, or like, that's interesting. That came through. That's also what I need. It's not, you know what I mean? So there's some power to that for sure.
And I do the same thing with the podcast. And you were actually one of the ones that said this to me that changed my life when you said, I don't over plan for my podcast. I let it come to me. And I'm like, wait, that's allowed. And so then I just started like praying the prayer to the Holy Spirit right before the podcast. And I just trust that he's going to tell me what I'm supposed to say. And he does. Yeah.
Wow. And you're able to surrender into that.
Yes.
How have you allowed that to happen? Because I know what a lot of people, whether religious or not, right? Or whether it's like whatever it is that makes them feel like more open and expansive, whether they call that God or he or universe or however they identify with it. I'm just curious because I know a lot of people have that relationship with God or something bigger or greater than them. And the thing is, they don't trust it. They don't trust that it's going to come. So I'll say like sometimes whenever I say that to people, I'm like, I don't really plan webinars till like an hour before. I don't. And also I want to also say that I have a lot of experience. So I have developed, you know what I mean? Back in the past, I wouldn't have been able to because I wasn't developed enough. So I have enough experience at this point that it can come through with more ease. Right. But sometimes whenever I say that to people, even people who are developed and have done a million webinars and things and podcasts, they're like, oh my gosh, that's terrifying. There's no way I could do that. Right. Yes. How did you get to the place? And probably like when I initially said it to you, I'm sure you were like, wait, what? How did you get to the place where you trusted it?
Yeah. So I'm going to kind of go into what I think the process of manifestation is from my perspective, because I think it answers this question. Because to me, the process of manifestation, the way I like to call manifestation is co-creating with God, right? Like we're just simply letting ourselves work together with God so that he can bring into creation what he wants created in the world. And we're doing this thing, I call it the dance, where God's like sitting in the car, he's driving, I'm sitting right next to him, I'm the co-pilot, and I have to show up in order to move the thing as well, right? But to me, the process of manifestation involves 4 steps. And the first one is trust. The very first one is learn to trust that first he's put that desire in your heart, that he's going to show up for you, that he loves you more than anything. And then the second one is surrender. And that one has been one of the hardest ones to get used to. I think the trust has come a little bit easier in that he's never failed me. But the surrender part is hard because I think our humanity is like, no, I want to take control and lead the thing and move the thing forward so that I can get there faster. And we think we're going to get there faster if we're in control, but we don't. It just moves a lot slower.
Yeah.
And so, the next part is surrender. And then the third is believe. And the fifth is receive. But those are like 4 steps that I think it beautifully sums up manifestation when he's in the middle. Is like, you trust that he's going to show up for you, that he's guiding you.
Yeah. And
that surrender, I think, is a big piece of like putting it to him into what the timing is going to be, the way that it's going to happen, and how, the beautiful how of how it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Totally. Yeah. 100%. So it sounds like you had developed the trust, or you already, that felt solid for you, but it was the surrender piece that you had to work with. And how is it that you did that when it came to even the podcast specifically?
Yeah. So yeah, I think I had it with different areas of my life. So I was just looking at the evidence that I had so far. But honestly, I think it was a trial and error because at least with the podcast, I started the podcast with scripting everything and putting everything perfectly together. And what I started feeling is that I felt insanely restricted and I just could not function. And then I sounded like a machine.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and then it took me like 7 hours, I remember, to record and edit the very first.
Wow. That's
It
some
was
dedication.
It was awful. Yeah. So then I was like, okay, something is wrong. Like
Yeah.
this cannot be this difficult.
Yes.
And then I just remember praying about it. And God is like, it's not you who's showing up. Like, I'm going to be there with you. It's like, you can trust that I'm going to give you what you're going to talk about. And then that's going to come through. And but the thing is, like, we practice, right? It doesn't just come. It came with the trial and error of like, this is way too much work for what I signed up for. And then I'm like, okay, I'm just going to take a step back. So what I started doing was, I remember I was like bullet pointing everything to try to have a little control. But then I little was like, okay, what happens if I just let go?
Yeah.
And so I just got curious. And then I remember I was like, okay, God, what do you want to talk about today? And you just give it to me. The manifestation podcast was that way. It's like this whole last week was all about manifesting.
Wow.
So go.
Yes. Yes.
And and then like you just practice that, and I think it just grows little by little. I don't think it's
Yeah, 100%. Yep. And that's the way that I try to approach it and coach on it. Like you said, it grows little by little. So it's not like you have to go from like totally scripting something out for 7 hours, to like just channeling it, opening yourself up and right. Like, but it's like, what if I could trust just 1% more? What would 1% more of surrender look like? And over time, then you develop that. And then you see that you can trust it. And like you said, that evidence really helps too, once you start seeing that you can actually do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you're being provided, because I think the evidence piece is such a big thing when you're in the process of manifesting that dream or that goal.
Yeah.
To me, it's like, that's a huge thing. Like, you're just counting every bit of it. And I know that sometimes is hard because we're like, oh, we're not there yet. But to me, it just blows my mind how when you just let go of it, he gives it to you. Like, it's just so much easier to just let go and trust and just know that it's coming. And
you can just remember that.
Yes, if only.
Right? Let go. It's so much easier. Totally. So I'm curious because I took one of my favorite classes of all of my college. So I went to college for like fashion and retail merchandising, but I had to take this class called Practices of Religion. I don't exactly remember why I had to take it, but I did. And I took it over a winter. It was like a winter break, like intensive. Basically, it was like a three week thing. And it was my favorite class of all of college. Like, obviously it makes sense now why I love it. But what I loved is we studied so many different religions. And at that time, I was sort of starting to get into manifestation, not to the point of like where I am now, but I had read some manifestation books and things like that. And I remember seeing in so many different religions, I'd be like, oh, that reminds me of manifestation. Oh, they say it in that way. And that reminds me of manifestation. And oh my gosh, that's like a universal law, but they say it in that way. And I'm wondering within, the Catholic religion, are there things that you hear or learn, or maybe are even in the Bible that you're like, oh my gosh, this is so aligned with what I've learned in the movement or in the mastermind in terms of like universal laws and the things that I talk about?
Yeah. So I think that one that comes to mind, because you were one that helped me to learn how to do this, and it's a surrender. So we have a novena. It's like a 9-day prayer that is called the Surrender Novena. And it is my absolute favorite prayer ever, because it's basically saying, okay, Jesus, you take care of it. Like, that is the prayer that we repeat all of the time. And for me, that was one that fit so well when it came to manifestation, because in that prayer is God is asking us to give it to him. Like, okay, bring it to me, and then I'll take care of it. And so I think that's one of the things that it just fits so well with manifestation, when it's like, He's saying, okay, I've given you this desire, so give it back, and I will work through it with you.
Yes. Yes.
And I think it just fits so beautifully, because that's the thing. It's when it comes to, like, I'm trying to think, like one of the laws is like the law of attraction, right? You're attracting those things to you. But the way I see it, it's like we're attracting things with our own minds. We're always creating. I'm always saying this to my clients. You are creating whether you like it or not.
Right.
And so to me, it's like when you're focusing your attention on the lack, you will see more of it. But when you focus on the blessings in the gifts that he's giving you in this moment, in this particular moment, you see more of it. And so, like, that's how I understand the law, all the laws. I just translated into that language.
Yes, 100%.
But to me, it's like ultimately what God wants from us is to serve him and surrender to him.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's like if we don't practice that surrender, we don't do either. We suffer, we struggle, we are stuck in our heads, and then we don't serve, at least not to the potential we could.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Why do you think people leave? And I know in terms of my listeners, I have a wide variety of listeners. Some people are religious, some people are not religious, some people are more spiritual than others. And I mean, overall, I would say everyone's probably slightly spiritual at least and open to it because manifestation. But for those that do have faith in God or a higher power, or think of it as like universal love, however it resonates for you. And I'm just wondering, in terms of your clients, like, why do you think people forget about God and leave God out of certain things?
I think it's that need of control. I think it's our fallen humanity of wanting to fix it ourselves. And I think that's one of the mistakes that I heard a lot before I got into manifestation. And I also believe that manifestation was all about ourselves, like figuring it out on our own.
Yeah.
Which is a horrible misunderstanding.
Totally.
But I think that is the part of it, is just because it is so hard to just simply let go.
Yeah.
Especially when you're going through a rough time, you just want to hold on to it. But I think we forget that God is for us, not against us. Like, he is protecting us, he's guiding us, he's loving us, he's providing. And I think that's the mistake, is like believing that. I think that's what happens, is we believe we're on our own. We have to fix it on our own.
Totally.
And yeah, I think that's the main thing, is that we forget that God is an all loving God.
Yes, 100%. And I mean, I know that even for myself, like, I would forget that I could bring it into everything, whether, with manifestation, with God, with my spirituality. It's like, I had, for most of my life, I would bring it into all of these areas of my life and manifest incredible things, and had just, it brings so much when you have that in your life. But there were certain areas I left it out of, like with initially my relationship with my body and weight loss. Like, no, I have to do that on my own. And that's hard. Also with business, also with my relationship with money. It's like, I left it out of those things and almost forgot that I have this superpower and this resource that I can bring in anything.
A big resource too.
Yeah, I guess that's what you call it, like the most incredible resource of all time that I'm not even utilizing. And it's like, I noticed, because it was like after that 100K year where I really burnt myself out and I really kind of hustled my way there. I did a lot of mindset work, but I did not bring my spirituality, I didn't bring God, and I didn't bring manifestation into it. And I made that shift after that year, and my business has completely changed since then. So I think it's a good question, if you're a person of faith, to ask yourself, where am I leaving this out? I think that's one of the most powerful questions. And how can I bring it in? Hi, friend. Let me ask you something. Are you ready to up-level your money mindset and really release the things that have been holding you back. Release your limitations and your money blocks and that self-doubt and imposter syndrome that's been coming up for you, that's getting in the way of creating more abundance and more impact in your business. If so, I have the perfect opportunity for you that you're going to absolutely love. So mark your calendars for September 20th and 21st, because I am hosting my first ever abundance retreat live in San Diego, California. So we're going to come together and we are going to do the inner and outer work to create more abundance in your life. And I absolutely cannot wait for this. So picture it, me, you, and a group of soulful entrepreneurs coming together, doing a combination of coaching and other fun activities that are going to help you shift your energy and shift your money mindset in a massive way. My past retreat participants have said things like, I feel like I got 6 months of coaching in 2 days, because it's an immersive and a transformational experience. And it's so much fun. The people who come to these are amazing, and there's so much connection and networking that happens. And I just want to invite you in. And right now we have our early bird discount. So you can get some money off. All you have to do is go to the show notes and register. And I will see you in San Diego in September. It's going to be so much fun.
Yeah, because in everything, we can bring him in absolutely everything, and everything just gets so much easier. I cannot imagine my relationship with my husband without him in the middle, or my motherhood without him in the middle. But I think it's easy, for example, in our business, to leave him out of the picture, because it's like, well, this is our business. We're supposed to figure it out. And truly, it's not. I just had a moment this past week where I was in doing my holy hour, and I'm like, God, why have you not? Like, I'm like, I want you to bless my business. And he like popped in my head. It's like, you haven't asked me to.
Yeah. Oh.
And then it's like, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have not asked him to.
Yes.
And what blows my mind is that when I trust him, he just shows up and gives me the thing.
Yes.
I just had it a couple of weeks ago, and this was the podcast that I did, because I had it in my head. I want to take a trip before my third baby's born. And I'm like, I want to take a trip with my girls. And I had planned it, and I planned it some more, but I did not ask him anything. And then I'm like, wait, we were looking into it, and somehow our cabin that we had rented was in the middle of absolutely nowhere and 7 hours from here. And I'm 7.5 months pregnant. So I'm like, this is a terrible idea. So that night we're like, okay, God, you know what? Like, you take care of it, because if we are supposed to have a trip, we're going to take it. And that night we signed up to go to Florida in a month. And it was like way cheaper than going to Missouri, which is insane.
Oh my gosh.
And then
I'm from Missouri. I would take Florida.
I know. And then we're like 3 minutes away from the beach. Could not have planned it better. And it was not something that I didn't expect to be able to go and do, but God is like, okay, thank you. I got it from here.
Yes, you know? It can be so much better when we bring that in, and when we remember. And I think that's the key, is just continuously remembering, because as humans, we forget, you know. And yeah, actually, like, that's reminding me of a story of something that recently happened to me too, where I also did a similar practice. So my condo, we bought the condo about 1.5 years ago, and initially it was amazing. And unfortunately, I mean, it's tragic for the whole island, but there was the massive fires in Lahaina, and it's really caused so many, people lost their homes, but also tourism has gone down. So the whole island's really struggling. People who still have their homes, but work in tourism, and, there's not very many bookings and things like that. Like, the actual economy has gone down by like 25% since that happened in Maui. So it's a tragedy, right? And we had bought our condo. It was new. And right after that happened, no bookings at all, right? Like, half the people canceled. And it's been 1 year since then. And still people are like, our neighbors are all like, yeah, it's half the prices we used to charge, and we're getting half the bookings. And I just decided I was going to surrender it, because I'm like, what can I do about this? I was like, I'm going to surrender it, and I'm just going to bless every person who does come. I'm going to bless the condo. I'm going to bless every person who does come energetically, of course, because I don't even I have a rental manager. I don't even talk to them or anything.
Yeah.
But I just bless it every day. And I've been blessing the people. And I swear to you, Karla, we had 0 bookings in August. I started this practice and I look at Airbnb and I'm like, oh, what literally just happened? It is fully booked in August, which makes no sense because August is actually a pretty the low season. And then it started getting bookings. I'm like, what is actually happening? Like all I'm doing is blessing the condo and blessing and giving gratitude for the people who are there. And it wasn't coming from urgency of it needs to book more. It was like, it's fine. You know, and yeah, it's just,
That blows my mind. Well, and another story was this past weekend when you texted to do this podcast. Because I had it in my head, similar thing of like, how do I calculate this thing so that eventually it happened? Because I was like, this was one of my, oh, it'd be awesome to be on her podcast someday. And I had to create this timeline of how long it was going to take and what I need to achieve in order to. And then when you texted me to do this podcast about manifestation with Catholicism, I'm like, I just laughed because I'm like, I just love how when I let you take care of it, you're like, here you go. This is what I need you to do. And that's the thing is like, that's the trust that comes into play too, is trusting that he's leading us there for a reason and that it's going to turn out better.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Yeah. So if you were to give advice to people who want to do this more often, but are like, how do I do it? What could I do? What's some ways that I could bring this into my business? What advice would you have? Do you have any ideas or practices?
Yeah, I think, so for me is that prayer time, that quiet time where you just connect with God and ask him and then just give him gratitude ahead of time. That's one of my favorite practices is just practicing gratitude ahead of time. Even when you don't see the evidence, just know that he's leading you there for a reason. And then my other thing is like, this is a partnership. He is God. He knows better. And I think that's the reminder we need to have for ourselves is that even when it doesn't make sense, he has the right timing for everything. And a better way for everything. And most of the time is easier. So just trust that it's going to be easier at the end. But it is a partnership and it's the giving and receiving. I just saw the episode of Friends come in my head. Because one of my favorite lines is a quote from St. Augustine, is without God, I can't. Yeah. Without me, he won't. And I just love that line because I think we spend so much time trying to take control, but we need to trust that we can't do it without him. Yeah. But if we don't move, he also won't do it.
Right. Oh my gosh. That's so good. I love it. Okay. So I have another question for you because I have heard, I've had clients who have asked me who, both Catholic and Christian, who have said, in the Bible, it says we shouldn't manifest in some way. I haven't exactly seen the words or the line that they're referring to, but they think that it's against the Christian religion to manifest. Do you have any idea why they're saying that or what the interpretation of that is that might be misinterpreted?
Okay. So the way I've researched and the way I've talked about with my spiritual director too, is manifestation is literally creating. That you explained it that way too, where it's like we are bringing God's desire for the world and the works that he needs done in the world to be created, to be manifested. That is what it's called. And in the Bible, like the way I've always seen it is the word manifestation or manifest. It's God's work being done on earth. Yeah. That's how I've always understood it. And I think that helps me clarify that in my head. But I'm missing something else. What was the other piece that you said?
Is there anything within the Bible that's...
Okay, so that was the part I didn't want to miss because I think the misunderstanding is that we're manifesting what we want in our timing, in our way. That we're not supposed to do. Because we don't know what's best for us and we don't have that power. So the clarification we need to remind ourselves is that we don't have that power, is we're co-creating. So we're basically just opening ourselves up for what it is that God is calling us to do. And we're taking actions in alignment to who he is and whom he's calling us to be, rather than doing it on our own. Because I think that's the biggest mistake when it comes to manifestation, and what I believe manifestation was until I met you, that it's just you do it on your own. It's your way, your timing, and you force things to happen. And that's not how it works.
Right.
Or at least it's not the way it should work.
Right. That's not how I teach it. That's not how I practice it. And I think it is totally a misconception. And I always, the way that I describe that is like, where are you manifesting from? Is it the ego? Right? Because we can feel that. That's when we're trying to do it on our own, when we're doing what we think we need to do to be worthy, successful, X, Y, or Z. Yeah. It's not a true soul desire. How do you, and the way that you mentioned it was, you know, when you're just, how did you say it? You said, we're not manifesting on our own, or it's not co-creating what we want. It's what God wants. How do you know the difference?
I think that's the persistency of God. And then like, also, I think the biggest thing for me is that it's not just for me. It's not like a selfish desire. There's always a sacrifice involved. At least that's how it's been for me. There's something that I really, really want. Like for me, my goal is to start traveling with our family and be in Italy for as long as we possibly can. But there's a sacrifice involved in that. And then there's a sacrifice in like, okay, if that's really what you want, you have to become this kind of person, rather than just a selfish desire of like, I just want money. I don't know. It's just something that is he's asking us to grow. And that's what I love about it too, is he's asking us to develop into that next level.
Right.
And trust him. It requires us to trust him.
Yeah.
Because I think anytime we're trying to manifest without him, it doesn't feel that way. It's just like we're in control.
Yeah. Trying to force it to happen.
Trying to force it to happen. Exactly.
Yes. 100%. And I've done it both ways. I've tried it both ways. It doesn't work very well from the ego. And I've tried it many times, right? Or it can work, but you'll get there and you don't feel the fulfillment of what you think you'll actually, you know what I mean? Like it's not giving you what you actually want, because it's not a true, you know, like you're saying like God's desire for you, or like a soul desire. And the way that for me, the way that I attune to it is like, what do I really want? If there's no shoulds, if there's no way I should do it, there's no way that's better than the other way. Like, what do I actually feel called to do? What do I actually feel called to create? What lights me up when I actually think of the vision? Like, if the vision doesn't light you up, I don't know. Right.
Yeah, and I think again, one of the things that I have loved is that it forces us, when we align ourselves up with what we truly, truly want, which he's going to put it in our hearts, we're going to know. And you find that clarity, then you have this, it's one of the hardest things I think in our faith to do and to settle into. And it is our reliance in him. So that I think is really, that's a key point. It's like we rely on him to reach this goal, but it does light us up ultimately. Like there's just a feeling inside of you that even though it's hard and it seems crazy, you can't stop thinking about it. And this is to me like, yep, that's his thing.
Totally. I love that so much. Oh my gosh.
And the confirmation, like if you're not sure, come back, pray some more, let him guide you, because he will confirm it.
Yeah. So, and what ways do you see that happening?
I love calling it his persistence, because example, my niche.
Yeah.
That was the first desire of my life. And then he got us like, yeah, okay, go your way. Go do your thing.
You'll be back.
He's like, are you missing anything?
Yeah.
And then I would be like, okay, I feel like I'm missing something. What are you missing?
Yeah.
And then he just lets you come. I love that God coaches us through life. This is, by the way, when you were talking about how it affected my business too, or my coaching, that's the thing. I always feel like our clients, and I hear this from you all the time too, when you say things to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, she was hanging out with God because he just said that to me. and it keeps happening.
Yep.
But it's that alignment.
I've heard this story. If you hear something 3 times or more, like it's time to pay attention. It doesn't mean you have to pay attention. If something's happening like 3 times in a row, It means pay attention.
Yes. Well, and you were like, I remember that session with you and you're like, I'm like, I just don't know if I'm supposed to be the Catholic life coach. Yeah. And you're like, well, what is it required to be the Catholic life coach? You have to be a Catholic and you have to be a life coach. And I was like, oh, good heavens. I need to be the Catholic life coach.
Because you were scared of stepping into that.
Yes, I was. I was very scared of stepping into it. It felt like big shoes to fill. I think is what it was. And it still feels that way, but I'm just trusting that there's a reason why he has me here. And so it's just, he's leading the thing. So
I love it. And it's the becoming too, right? Because that's why sometimes it feels scary, because there is a becoming. We have to shift our identity and how we see ourselves and all of these things and be willing to become it, which is stretchy and it doesn't always feel uncomfortable. And we have to lean into that trust, surrender, receive, right?
Yes. Yeah. 100%, because it is uncomfortable. I mean, I remember like stepping into the microphone and the camera and recording. It's just like, oh my gosh, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And now it's just like, it's my favorite thing in the world to do, just sit behind the mic and record the podcast.
Yep.
But it doesn't come from one day to the other. It's just, you become that person. And I do love the healing process. That's how I always explain coaching too, is you have a process. You taught me this. Go figure. But you taught me that, from the person you are today to the person whom you're wanting to become, your future self, there's a lot of steps of healing. And that's why I think it's so beautiful to combine life coaching with our faith, because we don't heal ourselves. Like God is healing us in every step, but then we have that person that is guiding us without believing our lies and our resistance and our own thoughts.
Yes.
And it's just you're co-creating that healing with God as well.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that so much.
So fun.
And you know what I was just thinking? I think this is why we have these desires that feel impossible oftentimes. So many of almost all of my clients are working on something that feels kind of impossible. But I think it's placed there for us, because then we get to the place where we're like, it doesn't make logical sense. It's almost like you have to have faith and like know that, okay, this wasn't all me that created this, and I couldn't do this from all of me. So it strengthens our faith.
It does.
Right?
100%. Yeah. I think the thing that's popping in my head right now is the other piece of this is our age. I think we get to a point where we start overthinking everything in our minds.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I was 16, I decided to leave my country, Venezuela. And then it's just like, I didn't care.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm going to stay in the US. How? I don't know. God will figure it out.
Yep.
And he did. And that's my memory of it. But when you're younger, you don't have all of these misconceptions and beliefs about yourself that need to be healed. And then it's like, no, we just trust that it's there for a reason, even though it doesn't make any sense to anyone else.
Right.
Or yourself sometimes.
Totally. 100%. Yes. Our logical mind is like, how is that going to happen? How am I getting from here to there? And yet, if you lean into this, it happens. I mean, I am still blown away thinking about my life. Like if my 15-year-old self had saw what I've created, it would have been like, how? And there is I don't know. It like things happened.
Yes. But
I had the faith. I believed in it. Yeah.
Yes. Totally. We're just open to taking that next step and trusting that next step will lead somewhere else. Like I love it. Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, I love you, Karla. And I want everyone to know where they can find you, how they could work with you if they're interested in working with you as a Catholic life coach. Please share all the things.
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram at the Catholic Life Coach. And then my podcast is the Catholic Life Coach Podcast. And if you're interested in working with me, my website is just karlafitz.com. And I do work one-on-one with clients and creating that dream life and that aligned life with him. So
she's a magical person. So connect with her.
As are you.
Thank you, Karla. Hey, thanks for listening. I hope this episode is something that you'll be able to add to your manifestation toolbox to come back to when you need a little extra motivation. If you like what you've heard today and want to take it deeper, you've got to come check out my signature coaching program, the Money Manifestation Movement. It's the place where you'll not only learn manifestation, but you'll begin to live it alongside me and an amazing community of like-minded entrepreneurs doing this work together. Head on over to jamieberman.com to learn more.